It was late autumn in the small town of Maple Ridge, Pennsylvania. The leaves had taken on their final golden glow before the wind would carry them away, and the sky had that particular kind of quiet gray that made everything feel paused, waiting for something to happen. That's exactly how Emily Carter felt, like her entire life was in a silent holding pattern. Emily was 32, a school counselor at the local high school, the kind of person everyone trusted with their secrets, but who hadn't quite figured out her own. Her days were filled with listening, comforting, and offering advice she often wished someone would give her. Her nights were quiet, spent in the company of books, herbal teas, and the occasional bottle of wine. Her friends had moved to different cities, gotten married, or had kids. And Emily, well, she was still waiting. One particular evening, after another long day, Emily sat curled on her living room couch, flipping through a dusty journal she hadn't opened in years. It was filled with dreams from her 20s, travel plans, relationship goals, life ambitions, some crossed off, many not. Her eyes stopped on a quote she had scribbled across the top of one page. "This will appear when the universe knows you're ready to hear it." She read it again and again. The words stirred something deep within her, like a whisper she'd ignored for far too long. She had first heard that quote during college philosophy class from a guest speaker named Dr. Julian Brooks. He was one of those people who didn't just speak. He reached into the minds of everyone in the room. Emily remembered hanging on to every word. He had spoken about synchronicity, destiny, and how the universe has a strange way of sending messages, but only when you're truly ready. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept hearing that sentence. The next morning, on a whim, she decided to look up Dr. Brooks. He had become somewhat of a recluse, but she found a recent podcast interview he'd done with a self-help author. In it, he mentioned he was writing a new book and invited listeners to attend a weekend seminar, a sort of spiritual retreat, in the Berkshires. There were only 20 slots available. Emily didn't hesitate. She signed up. She didn't know what she expected to find there, clarity, perhaps, or even just a break from the monotony of her carefully controlled life. The retreat was nestled in a serene part of Massachusetts, surrounded by misty mountains and trees that whispered in the wind. On the first day, Emily found herself in a circle with strangers, teachers, artists, tech workers, even a retired firefighter. They were all there for the same reason. Something in them was unfinished, waiting, aching for truth. Dr. Brooks looked older now but had the same spark in his eyes. He welcomed everyone and simply said, "Nothing will happen until you're ready to let go of what you think should be and start listening to what is." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. That line struck harder than she thought it would. Over the next 2 days, the group engaged in deep conversations, meditations, writing exercises, and silent walks through the woods. Emily tried not to expect too much, but inside she was hoping for a sign, something from the universe, something that would tell her where she was supposed to go next. On the second night, after a guided reflection exercise, participants were asked to write a letter to their younger selves, not just any letter, but one that told the truth they'd been running from. Emily sat with her pen hovering above the paper. At first, nothing came. Then slowly, the words flowed. "Dear Emily, you've waited so long for permission. You've asked for signs, begged for clarity, and looked for meaning in every wrong place. But the truth? You are the sign. You always were. Every time you kept going despite the hurt, every time you were there for someone else when no one was there for you. That was the universe applauding your strength. You keep asking, what's next? But maybe the question should be, what's now? You're not behind. You're exactly where you need to be. Not everyone's path is loud. Some bloom quietly. You're one of them. And you're blooming now." Tears blurred her eyes as she read it back. She hadn't realized how deeply she needed to hear those words from herself. The next morning, something had shifted in Emily. It wasn't something visible or dramatic, but it was something real. She felt lighter. Not because all her questions had been answered, but because she no longer needed all the answers at once. On the last day of the retreat, Dr. Brooks handed each attendee a small, folded note. When Emily opened hers, it read, "When you stop waiting for the universe to speak and start listening, You'll realize it's been whispering all along. Driving home, Emily took a longer route. She passed through towns she hadn't seen before, watched the leaves tumble down in slow, beautiful spirals, and noticed how the late afternoon sun painted the hills in strokes of amber. Everything looked the same, yet different. Back in Maple Ridge, life didn't suddenly become extraordinary. She still counseled teens through heartbreak, still spent evenings sipping chamomile tea, and still had moments where she wondered if she was doing enough. But now, she noticed things more. The kindness in a student's thank you note, the joy in hearing her mother's voice on the phone, the peace in walking by herself through the town park. A few months later, she started a blog called The Quiet Bloom, where she shared reflections on growth, healing, and listening to life's gentle nudges. Her first post was titled, "This will appear when the universe knows you're ready to hear it." She ended it with this: "Sometimes, the message you're waiting for isn't written in the stars or shouted from mountaintops. Sometimes, it's tucked inside your own heartbeat, waiting for you to be still enough to listen." And people did listen. Slowly, her blog grew a small following, people who resonated with her gentle truths and quiet wisdom. She was invited to speak at local events, offered interviews, even approached to write a book. But fame or success didn't define Emily. What defined her was the moment she stopped waiting to be told what to do, and instead started hearing the voice within. Years later, when people asked her how her journey began, she'd smile and say, "It began the moment I finally heard something I'd written to myself years ago. The moment the universe knew I was ready." Because that's the thing about life. The right message, the right moment, the right shift, it doesn't happen on our schedule. It comes quietly, patiently, when we've softened just enough to receive it. Emily Carter became a mirror for others. Not because she had all the answers, but because she had learned to live the questions fully, honestly, and without fear. And that quote, the one she had scribbled years ago, it was no longer a mystery. It was a promise fulfilled.